Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing an album review, one I've been meaning to do for like a little while now, but yeah, just like getting around to it. It is the Beautiful South's album 0898, so yes, I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy as well as all of the singles from the album, and then going through each of the songs in detail. This was the band's third album, released on the 30th of March in 1992. So, this was coming off the back of the second album, Choke, which was a quite a successful record for them. Like, that album had like a #1 single on it with a Light with like a Little Time. The album also charted quite well. However, follow-up singles were like a bit of a flop, like My Book and Let Love Speak Up Itself. The band were also a little bit disappointed with the kind of sound and production of that album, so they started to scout around for a new producer. So the name that they drew up was John Kelly. So his name came up after they kind of compiled a list of albums which they liked the sound of, or just sort of liked the albums, and his name came up after work that he'd done with the likes of Kate Bush, The Damned, Deacon Blue, and Prefab Sprout were mentioned, and they must have hit it off really well with John Kelly, as he would go on to produce every Beautiful South album until 2003's Gaze. This record also started a trend in Paul Heaton's songwriting methods, where he would go on a foreign holiday to write his lyrics. Up to this point, all of his songs had been written in Hull. However, starting from this album, he would go away to various European destinations. So for this album, he went to Gran Canaria. So yeah, it's definitely a big change there, from Hull, he'd been used to. As was typical with other Beautiful South albums, the recording process for this album was rather slow, with some of the band members seemingly more interested in going to the pub and playing games, as opposed to recording. I guess they were also touring quite a lot as well, and I think a lot of this was getting to Paul Heaton a little bit, perhaps suffering from some burnout. He boarded a flight to Sardinia without telling anyone, and disappeared for a few days, leaving the rest of the band to undertake a short promotional tour off Germany. Also notably, this would be the last Beautiful South album to feature Brian O'Connor, so following the release and the promotion for this album, she decided to leave the band. I think she was wanting I guess her own space to pursue a solo career. She wasn't writing any off the Beautiful South songs. So I think she's wanting a bit more creative input, but also she wasn't happy with the kind of direction that some of Paul Heaton's lyrics were going in, particularly when she's seen early drafts of some of the lyrics for the follow-up album Meow. So upon the album's release, it received quite a bit of critical praise. It was ranked in multiple publications' end-of-year lists as the best albums of 1992, including Vox, who ranked it at number 18, and The Enemy, who ranked it at number 44, describing it as a no-holds-barred examination of the human condition. So in the UK, the album reached number 4 in the charts, eventually going gold. However, this was lower than their last two albums, which both reached number 2, and was considered somewhat of a disappointment, despite their next release, Meow, falling even lower at number 6. So I'll just show you my vinyl copy of it here. This is just a reissue of it, which I think is still relatively readily available. And originals, again, this was just the start of the vinyl decline sort of thing. Here's the cover. I do really like the cover, and also the inner sleeve here, which has all of these nice illustrations to go along with each of the tracks. Now I'm not 100% sure if these were commissioned for the album, but they're all done by a guy called David Cutter. But I'm not sure whether he was commissioned to do these, or whether these are just some of his images that the band asked to use for the album. But no, I really like all of those, and then the other side just has the lyrics there. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. Tears that I should have shed. Okay, so we kick things off with Old Red Eyes Is Back, for which I've got the 12-inch single and the 7-inch single here for. So this is a really great opening track. It's one of Heaton's most celebrated, and I'd say today one of his most well-known songs. Great kind of piano introduction, very quite a softly sung verse, like I'd say, it's like relatively, and then this more like upbeat chorus comes in and like really carries the song along. Essentially, lyrically, it's about a kind of like old kind of pub goer, kind of wasting his sort of like later years away. He sings like old Red's in town and sitting late at night, he doesn't make a sound, just adding to the wrinkles on his deathly frown. And then you've got some great images later on about sort of listening to his body thorn and sort of stuff like that. And I think it's a great lyric, which like would be rather prophetic, like for like Heaton, like as like a couple of years later he himself would suffer from quite a significant like problem like with like alcohol, and like, but this was kind of just on the cusp of that, so I do wonder maybe whether subconsciously like he was perhaps maybe writing like about like himself, like on like this one here. So yeah, this was as I said, like the lead off single for the album, and it did okay. It reached number 22, which I guess when you compare it to the band's previous kind of lead off singles, which have been Song for Whoever and A Little Time, both of those reached number 2 and 1 respectively. This one, 22, was a bit of a flop, by comparison. But no, this is a really good single. I mean, I've maybe overheard it a little bit, and that's maybe why I can't quite bring myself to give it a 10, because it's a great song, but again, it's not one that I would necessarily seek out like myself. But this is the 12-inch here, so you get 2 B-sides, a song called Fleet Street BC and Diamonds, which I think is a cover song, but I'm not 100% sure like who did like the original. I think that Fleet Street BC is a very House Martins-y kind of track. A bit reminds me a lot of some of like their B-sides, the kind of slightly gospel-y tinged kind of like B-sides and that. And then, like I said, Diamonds, like a song like by Brian O'Connor, which is great as well. So yeah, really good song to kick off the album.
Closer than a sister to her.
Okay, next track up is the second single for the album, and that is We Are Each Other here. Again, got the vinyl, got the 7-inch for it here. This is also like the Beautiful South's last 12-inch single released like as well, which is a little bit sad because they all have like really fantastic like quite striking covers. But yeah, We Are Each Other. This is a really great kind of almost kind of jangle pop song, I'd say. Very kind of sort of a bit more guitar driven than some of like their other tracks, and I guess a little bit maybe more in tune with the kind of current, like at like the time, alternative rock kind of music trends. Lyrically, I guess about a couple who have become kind of so close that they've become essentially like the same person and have kind of lost all of like their personality. Like he sings in it, like there's no more little secrets we haven't yet disclosed. We bore the living daylights off anyone too close, and all our cards at Christmas are written to us both. Add it up, who's got the most? So it's a really great song. Again, there's nice contributions like from like Brian O'Connor, like in like the middle section, like as well. And this was a moderately successful single in the UK, reached number 30 on the charts, but was probably more notably a US success. It reached number 10 on the US alternative charts, so this became their biggest stateside success. And like you've got some great B-sides on there. So a song called His Time Ran Out, which is a kind of again very House Martins. It reminds me a bit of things like Step Outside and what's the other one, like Johannesburg, possibly. Like those kind of more like sort of like acoustic bass tracks. And then I Started to Joke, which is brilliant and I think should have been on the album. So yeah, that's We Are Each Other.
So I'll take these high heel shoes.
Okay, third track on the album now is The Rocking Chair. This is a wonderful Brian O'Connor lead vocal, essentially about a kind of lonely woman kind of despairing like at like her life, and I guess like a kind of treatment from kind of sort of like other men, like and kind of like society like at large. She sings with it like, I'll take these high-heeled shoes and I'll take these traditional views. I'll take this deep despair off a 30-year-old square to the rocking chair. She sings it really well. She just really really puts in a vocal performance with such feeling and such like emotion, which really carries out the track. Plus, I think the actual song itself is like really great in terms of like its music. The production really works on this one here. It's just a very tastefully done track, like I think. So yeah, the Rocking Chair has always been a firm favourite of mine, and that would get a 10 out of 10.
Across the world, in every coon, 1,000.
Next up is We'll Deal With You Later. Now this one is I guess musically a little bit more, I don't want to say like experimental, but it's got a kind of different kind of feeling to it, you know, like you can kind of tell on this track that they've changed producer. It sounds a lot more muscular kind of like sort of feel to it, like particularly like in like the drumming and also Dave Rothery's guitar sound. It just a real kind of crash like and sort of like dramatic effect like on like this song here, which is quite a political track. I'd say it easily is the most political that Paul Heaton gets like on this album. And basically I think it's kind of about Heaton's stance on kind of like the royal family. He sings that like governments will rise and fall, but royalty's still there. Don't worry if it's Queen or Duke. Try skiving down the pair. He sings on it, and yeah, I really like this song. Like when it's on the album, I think it's a good fourth track in. So yeah, that will get a 9 out of 10.
And if you pull a double one, I'll pack my bags and
Canestra Club is possibly one of my least favourites on the album. I think the album like at this point does go into a little bit like off like a mid-album slump for me. Domino Man, which is just filler for me. Like it's not one of my favourite Beautiful South songs. Yeah, it's not one I'd necessarily skip over like when I'm listening to the album. Maybe sometimes I might. Like I'm not sure. It's again Dave Hemingway kind of takes the lead like on like this one here, and just lyrically, I don't think it really says much. It kind of is talking about this kind of character, sort of like the Domino Man and sort of that. So it's quite a wordy song, but I just don't really think that there's much of a kind of message there like with like the track. There's just not a lot to like unpack with it, and I think it's just a little bit fillery for me. So yeah, Domino Man will get a 7 out of 10.
36 days, so what? So what?
Okay, the next track up, which closes off side one, is the slightly controversial 36D here. So this was one of the singles here. Like as you can see, this was I think the fourth single from the album, and this is my least favourite like track like on the album. It's probably also one of my least favourite like Beautiful South songs like as well. It's a kind of I guess Heaton wrote it as a kind of comment on the kind of glamour model industry, sort of pastry girl sort of thing. But even he has kind of then sort of come out and sort of criticised this song like a few years later, basically saying that he got it all wrong on this track. He was kind of blaming the kind of models themselves rather than sort of like the industry. So it's got a really kind of scathing like opening line: close your legs, open your mind, leave those compliments well behind, dig a little deeper into yourself. And this was also consequently one of the tracks that like sort of like made like Bryna like want to leave, although she did sort of persevere like after this song. But I think the next album was kind of like the kind of point where she was like, nope, like I'm out of here kind of thing. In terms of a single, this was a bit of a flop. It reached number 46 on the UK charts. Two B-sides are brilliant though. Like I'd say the B-sides on this are great, called Throw His Song Away and Trevor You're Bizarre. Both great songs. But this is definitely a worthwhile single to get, because you get 4 printed postcards as well, with just of some of those images like from like the album artwork there. So yeah, really nice package single. But yeah, one of my least favourite like Beautiful South songs, and I think it's one that Heaton himself has said that he regrets releasing it like to like this day. Okay, anyway, we're now back on the main album now. Side 2 starts with Here It Is Again. Now, this is a very kind of mysterious, kind of dark sort of sounding track. It's got a very almost kind of sinister like undertone to it, very rumbling kind of bass heavy track, this one here, with kind of synthesized strings like all over lag all over it like as well. Lyrically, I was kind of struggling to think of what this song was about. I mean, there's a kind of thing like the second line goes like it was another holiday argument when she threw him into the sea. A glass-bottom boat pulled him up. His face was rotting in weeds, so possibly perhaps about a kind of like attempted murder, possibly. So Heaton and Hemingway sing this track, and they sound great, like kind of like harmonising, like on like this track. So I think this is one of the stronger cuts, definitely one which I look forward to hearing, like on the album.
No other, she loves you like no other.
Okay, next up is Something That You Said. Now this one is a more kind of straight ahead, kind of almost kind of country-esque kind of song, but sort of lyrically, again, is another one of like these kind of twisted love songs. Again, possibly about murder. He sings like kind of like, again, like one of the lines is, so if you walk into your house and she's carving up your mother, she's only trying to tell you that she loves you like no other. So very kind of twisted kind of like love song this. I guess like it's very easy to kind of miss like these kind of like lyrics when you kind of combine it with kind of like, in this case, Dave Hemingway's very kind of ear-pleasing kind of vocal, but also the very understated musical like arrangement on this one. You've got a very kind of laid back like harmonica like on it like as well, and then also Bryner does some lines like as well. So it kind of has a feel which is not too dissimilar from like A Little Time, like I would say, but a really good song though, and like one like I think is like underrated like on the album.
One thing I never said to you. One thing I never.
Okay, next up is possibly my favourite track on the whole album. It's I'm Your Number One Fan. Now this one is a kind of three-way kind of lead. I was going to say like a three-way duet, but I'm not quite sure what the kind of like word is. It's a quartet trio song kind of thing, you know, like where they kind of each of them kind of take a verse and then Heaton kind of takes care like off like the chorus. And lyrically, I mean, to my ears anyway, this seems just like quite a sincere kind of love song or kind of thank you song, like, you know, like or like to someone. He sings it like, you didn't have to love me where others got rid. You didn't have to treat me like a very good friend, but I'm glad that you did. So I don't think that there's any kind of like sort of like hidden agenda or kind of like sort of like other kind of motives like with this song. I think generally this is just a really nice sort of thank you song, like I guess like to someone, like sort of like full of like admiration like for someone, like I guess. But then kind of like by the end of the song, you kind of get like the picture becomes a bit clearer, and the kind of person like isn't sort of with them like anymore. He sings like, your picture hangs in the same old place even though that you've gone. So again, not sure like if this person's maybe died or if it's a kind of lover who's kind of like left like the narrator like off like the track. But I think it's a really great song, and I like how all three share the vocals on this. I think it kind of keeps the track quite interesting for me. So yeah, I'm Your Number One Fan will get a 10 out of 10.
We promise ourselves this is no one night stand.
Okay, next track up is a Bell Bottom Tear. Now this was, I think, the third single from the album. Again, got it here, and this is another Brian O'Connor kind of showcase song. And she really gives it like a role like on like these two tracks, like this, there's Bell Bottom Tear, and also like the Rockin' Chair earlier. Really, being able to sort of like inhibit kind of the character like off like the track, like sort of like effortlessly. Like on here, I mean, she sounds like the kind of disappointed and kind of damaged sort of woman like who's been taken advantage of like on like this track here. Sort of like she sings like, there's a tear, not through confusion, through fear. And yeah, it's just a really nice song, this one here. Again, this was the most successful single from the album, and it reached number 16 on the UK charts. So yeah, Bell Bottom Tear, a really, really good song there. For me, would get a 9 out of 10.
You do English, I'll do song.
Okay, next one up now, the penultimate track is You Play Glockenspiel, I'll Play Drums. So this is possibly one of the Beautiful South's most weird, kind of off-the-wall kind of songs, like I would say. I mean, musically, it's got a kind of slightly dark, sort of sinister kind of feel to it. You've got a very kind of frantic kind of synthesizer part, which kind of like is like the hook like off like the song, and then this very kind of rolling, kind of galloping kind of bass part, and then a kind of vocal which is almost kind of whispered like by Heaton on it. You know, it sounds very mysterious and kind of sinister, this one here. But lyrically, again, I'm not really sure what this one is about. You know, it kind of almost feels a bit kind of psychedelic and kind of almost like kind of like a nonsense lyric, but with a lot of kind of striking like imagery like on it. He sings like, there's a girl with a plastic pair of shoes, two eyes permanently bruised, can't find the time to be alarmed, just stood there spinning the yarn, he sings. And again, it's a great track production-wise. You know, it's maybe more the production I like on this song. You know, it just sounds great, I think. You know, perhaps there's maybe some misgivings about what the actual song like is about, you know, or like kind of like as a piece, like as a kind of song to play, like to play just like on like an acoustic guitar, it might be lacking, but just everything comes together so well like on this one here that I do have to give it a 9 out of 10.
Queuing with the old folk. There's an old man with a wicked.
Okay, and next up to close off the album is When I'm 84. Now this one is a kind of, I guess, a pun or kind of take on like the Beatles, like When I'm 64, but very kind of a fun, witty song, I think, to end the album on. You know, basically kind of like, whereas like When I'm 64 kind of paints this kind of very kind of sort of like idyllic kind of impression, like off like kind of old age. This one here is kind of a bit more rooted, I guess, like in like sort of like reality. Sings to it like no dribbling or incontinence, no longing for the old sixpence, just smoking weed till age makes sense. He sings a very kind of funky song, this one here, with a great kind of catchy piano part, which just really like is like a great hook to the song. Again, some great sort of like harmony vocals on it, and then kind of ends up with a like a bit more like of like an intense kind of vocal workout like from Heaton. So I think a really good album closer there for me. When I'm 84 would get a 9 out of 10.
Bastard way.
Okay, so overall this album would score 87%, so I think this is a really strong album here. I think it's relatively consistent, you know, with only a couple of missteps. You know, for me the 2 weak links are Domino Man and 36D. I think there was better B-sides which could have gone on place of both of those, and I think would have made this album almost flawless, like, to like be honest like with you. There's a good variety like on here in terms of sound and musical styles, and I think it's no wonder that they would continue to work like with like John Kelly like throughout like sort of like for like the rest like of like their career. Again, in many ways, this album kind of went against the grain, like, off, like, the time, which was all about kind of grunge, shoegaze, and kind of, like, an emerging kind of US, like, alternative rock kind of sound, thinking of, like, I mean, like, R.E.M. were at, like, their most, sort of, like, commercially successful, like, at, like, this point. So, kind of, the Beautiful South were, at this stage, almost kind of going into a slight kind of, like, wilderness before they'd kind of eventually, like, sort of, like, hit, like, the commercial big time again, like, with, like, their Carry On Up the Charts compilation. But this record here, they were still, like, they were kind of just about to enter a slightly like less like commercial phase, but a phase which I really do like in their career, where I think Heaton was writing quite personal songs like at like times, you know, quite like sort of heart quite like heart like on like his sleeve, but also kind of musically experimenting and doing sort of different things. And I think this album like is a good kind of showcase like of like those like sort of like coming together like really, really well. So yeah, certainly for me, one of my favourite like Beautiful South albums, definitely one which I think like is essential listening like for any fans like of like the band, you know, to kind of like sort of like like dig a bit deeper like sort of like down like the singles, you know, because they've got some really, really interesting stuff like on their albums, and I think this is a great showcase of that. Okay, so that's become to the end of this review, so I hope you have enjoyed my look at 0898 by The Beautiful South. Yes, if you've got any requests for future reviews, please do leave them down below in the comments, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.